Hello everyone. Can you hear me? Can you see me before starting the meeting? Maybe you can write yes on the chat box. Can you hear me properly? Great, yes. Great, super. Welcome everyone to our today's webinar, the joint webinar between UNFPA and Evaluate Global Network. I will briefly introduce myself. My name is Ahmad Arun. I am from Afghanistan. I will be acting as a moderator for our today's webinar. I'm the co-chair for the Evaluate Task Force 3, in charge for the organization of evaluation, virtual conferences, and e-learning programs. I'm working as a monitoring and evaluation director for one of the USAID projects in Afghanistan, and I'm the co-founder of Afghan Evaluation Society and the current board member of the Afghan Evaluation Society. Our today webinar is for 1 hour, as you may already receive the confirmation email. So we will be having two speakers, Mr. Marco Segun and Mr. Michael Dahl. I will be later on introduce both of them. So first of all, I would like to walk you through how to use the virtual conference. So first thing that you need to do is select your language right on the bottom of your screen, I mean the slides. The conference is broadcasting in 4 languages: English with simultaneous translation in French, Spanish, and as well as Russian. So you need to, whatever language that you want, you can select your desired language from the drop-down options. So whenever I am speaking or our honorable speakers are speaking, so right on the bottom of their video, there is a chat box that you can write your questions. We are copying your questions regularly, and then I will be asking and sharing the questions to the speakers, and then they will be responding to your question. So any question that you have, you can write in the chat box. Maybe refreshing the browser sound is still coming through clear here. Okay, great. At least the sound is clear. Good to know that. So let me provide you a brief introduction to the Evaluate Global Network. Evaluate is a global network that promotes engagement, innovations, and exchange among young and emerging evaluators, youth and young people. Evaluate Global Network was established back in 2015 during the Global Evaluation Week in Kathmandu, Nepal. The overall goal of the Evaluate is to promote engagement and also innovation among young and emerging evaluators across the globe. Evaluate, what is the function of the Evaluate network or the organizational structure? Evaluate as a management group and also 4 different task forces. Evaluate Task Force 1 is in charge for young and emerging evaluators and vote-based governance. Task Force number 1 of Evaluate is promoting the culture of evaluation and also the involvement of young and emerging evaluators in the VOPE governance, Voluntary Organization for Professional Evaluations. Evaluate Task Force 2 is Global Mentoring Program. It's a global mentoring program that 1 mentors and 1 mentee are working for a certain time with each other to build the capacity of the young and emerging evaluators. Task Force number 3, which is our task force, is in charge for evaluation e-learning programs. We organize and conduct evaluation conferences, virtual evaluation conferences. We have just completed our 4th annual virtual evaluation conference back in December 23rd December 2019. Which was a very successful one. And we do organize webinars, which one of the webinar is the one that we are now taking. And the task force number 4 of Evaluate is Youth Collaborative Approach to Evaluation. This is the new BB of the Evaluate, which actually is collaborating the youth contribution into the evaluation across the globe. So yeah, this was all about the Evaluate. If you have any questions about the Evaluate, about its operation, its activities, you can write your questions, or if you are interested to join the Evaluate Global Network, any task forces that I have just mentioned, so you can write in the chat box. We may later on responding to your questions. So now I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, which is Mr. Marco Egan. Mr. Marco Egan is Director Evaluation Office at UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund. Previously, Mr. Egan was the Director for the Evaluation Office of the United Nations Women, UN Women. He was the Chair for the United Nations Evaluation Group, the network of evaluation offices of 46 UN agencies. Mr. Egan is the co-founder and co-chair of Eval Partners, the global partnership for the national evaluation capacities, and Eval Gender Plus. Before that, Marco was responsible for the decentralized evaluation function, as well as the national evaluation capacity development portfolios at the UNICEF Evaluation Office. He was the regional chief monitoring and evaluation in the UNICEF Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia, Regional Office for Latin America and Caribbean, Brazil Country Office, and Niger Country Office. Mr. Marco also worked in international NGOs in Albania, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Thailand, and Uganda. He has authored dozens of publications, including Evaluating the SDGs with a No One Left Behind lens, Evaluation for Equitable Development Results, and How to Design and Manage Equity-Focused Evaluation. Adding to Mr. Marco bio, I'm entitled him as a great supporter of the young and emerging evaluators across the globe, specifically the Evaluate Global Networks. Mr. Egan, thank you so much for being so supportive for the young and emerging evaluators and for the Evaluate Global Network. I'm giving the floor to you, so welcome again.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Can somebody just confirm that you can hear me? If you can just type in the chat so that I'm sure. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, thanks a lot. The more than 130 participants that have joined the webinar today. That's really great. And thanks a lot, Ahmed, for organizing this quite interesting webinar. Perhaps the only thing that you didn't mention when you were presenting me is the fact that I've been a young evaluator, as you are now. And that's why I'm really also personally very interested in sharing my experience with you today. As Ahmed said, UNFPA is the United Nations Agencies for Population, and in the mandate of UNFPA, there is also to empower young people. And the motto of UNFPA is nothing for young people without young people. So the idea is really working closely together with young people and actually having young people in the driving seat with us just in a supporting role. And that's why we have this great collaboration with the Evaluators, through which we are trying to strengthening skills and competencies for young evaluators, but also facilitating access of young evaluators to the labor market, and also facilitating the giving a voice of young evaluators to major international events. So, can somebody move the slides as it looks from my side? I cannot either. If the administrator, okay. Thank you very much. So, sorry, sorry, just a second, because Michael came here yeah, I thought you were doing from your, okay, please come here, yeah. Okay, sorry, it was a bit of a miscoordination from our side. Anyway, what I was saying is that the fact why the UN is so supportive for young people, that's because young people has the power of 1.8 billion. This is the number of young people in the world. And that's why, that's also one of the reasons why the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres just recently launched the United Nations Strategy for Young People. UNFPA also launched its own strategy for young people, etc. And next slide. And that's very important because I think it's important to say that young people is not the future, as we always hear. But actually, next slide. Next slide, please. If the administrator can move the slide to the next. But actually, young people are the presence to ensure a sustainable and equitable future. And so that's why it is so important. Because young people are really agents of change. And next slide. And so young people are an agent of change, and in addition we have to always keep in mind that evaluation is also an agent of change because it can inform intervention, policies, program, projects, etc. On what works and what does not work, why, for whom it works or does not work, and under what circumstances. So that's why it's so important. It's really a call for you to be a young evaluator. And I would say not only simply a young evaluator, but a young evaluator who is true to the UN values of human rights, social equity and justice, gender equality, sustainability, and peace. Next slide. Next slide. Because unfortunately, it looks like I cannot change the light from myself. I'm trying to click on the next, but it doesn't work. And so that's making the presentation a bit... no, you see, it doesn't work. Okay, now it looks like it's working. Okay, so why to be a young evaluator in the UN system? First of all, because the UN system is the biggest intergovernmental organization. As you know, the United Nations is present in all the countries in the world. It's a very influential organization because actually it's composed by the states, by the countries of all over the world. So it's really an ideal and strategic forum and arena for discussion for the key topics that are relevant to the world. it also potentially has major impacts on the life of people. Because it works from, it goes from children's rights to atomic energy. It goes from sexual and reproductive rights, like in the case of UNFPA, to civil aviation, to poverty, inequality, etc., etc. And evaluation can really be key to all of these. So how to build a career in evaluation within the international development and humanitarian sector? Well, first of all, you should know yourself. You should know yourself in terms of what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, so that you can really leverage your strengths and you can strengthen the areas for improvement. Second is really follow your passion. If you don't have passion for human development, if you don't have passion for gender equality, if you don't have passion for addressing the climate crisis, etc., then I think it would be better that you don't work for the UN, but you work for any other organization. So it's really, the passion is something very, very important. Third, you should be intentional and focused. You should ask yourself, where would you like to see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And then build your professional career, and I even would say your life, towards that objective. But always do it with humility. So how to become a young evaluator in the UN system? Well, I think it's important that you always keep in mind that the UN, when is hiring evaluators, including young evaluators, first of all is looking for technical skills. Obviously, we are looking for young evaluators who knows what evaluation is, who are familiar and knowledgeable on evaluation approaches and methodologies, not only in theory, but also in practice. So while formal training, bachelor's degrees, masters, etc., are very important, they are not sufficient. Because the UN is not an academic institution. The UN actually is an organization that is really trying to take actions to change the life of people on the ground. So it's very important that in addition to these technical skills, you also have some practice at field level on how to make evaluations. And we will talk a little bit later also on how to facilitate these practices. But in addition to this, also the so-called soft skills are very important for anybody in general, but even more importantly for an evaluator, and even more for an evaluator working in the UN system. Because in the UN system is composed by people coming from all the countries in the world, from all the religion in the world, from all cultural and social backgrounds in the world. So it's very important that you are able to work in a multicultural environment. So it's very important that not only that you respect diversity, but actually you value diversity. And it's very important that you are able to work together with other people that are diverse from you, and you can actually value this diversity. And last but not least, as I already mentioned, passion. So the UN is really looking for somebody who is very strong, not only technically, who does not only have the soft skill to operate, but really has the passion and belief in what he or she is doing. So with this, I would like to give the floor to Michael, who very graciously accepted to join us today. Michael is the responsible in the UNFPA Human Resources Department, really for strengthening talent. So I think he's really the best person who can tell us more in detail on how to apply and actually to apply and be selected for work in the UN system. So, Michael, you have the floor. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I think I'm on. Hi.
Hello? Can everyone hearing me? Hello? We are sorry, it was a technical problem, so Mr. Michael was disconnected. I'm just connecting him back. Thank you.
It looks like you were disconnected. Okay. Okay. Right now. Okay, so I'm back. Hi, I'm Michael Dahl. I'm the Chief of Talent here at UNFPA. As you can see, I have this little pin on here. It shows the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the young girl in the middle, because we believe if we invest in the young girl, we invest in the things that will support all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. What I would like to do today is just to give you a brief talk about some of the recruitment techniques here, but also want to give you a few tips, because I think, for a lot of people, the UN is a little bit hard to understand, and there's, multiple different agencies. So we just want to give you a little bit of tips on what to think about as being one of the people who might be interested in the development arena. So first of all, you can see on the slide here, we just wanted to highlight that we are like any other big international organization. We have certain processes we go through and we recruit. So if you first look at the first bubble there, you are searching for a job opening, you're looking at different opportunities, and you should really try and think broadly about where do your skills best apply to the UN system. There are like multiple agencies, and they all have their different online platforms. So you should not rely on just going to under the UN. You should really go into each agency that you're interested in working. And all the agencies have a need for strong evaluations expertise. So, go into each platform, put in your profile, see what kind of jobs that are posted there, and then go in and put in your application. The way it works is that you typically have a different profile you need to create in each different system, and then you need to as well put in answer a lot of questions about your previous experience. We're looking for all the different types of work you have done that relates to that particular job and your education. And we also ask for references. So do really prepare well for that process. I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. Then we do, as many other big organizations, we have different written assessments that we do. We do first a shortlist, and then we contact people that we think really meet the criteria best, and then we do written assessments. We sometimes do vidcruiter assessments where you have to answer questions online through a platform where you have to you get a question and you have to answer within a couple of minutes. Some of you will probably have experienced it. It can be a bit intimidating, so I would recommend you practice it before you do it. Then we often also at more technical or more senior level positions, we have assessment centers. If you're not familiar with that and you are going to meet an assessment center in a recruitment process, I would also recommend you read up about it. It's typically simulations that will be similar to what the job would look like, and you're getting in different situations you have to respond to, and somebody will assess you the whole time. So it can also be a little bit intimidating at first, but it's simply for us to get a really good sense of would you be a good fit for this particular job. And then, of course, we have the interview phase. And the way we do it at the UN is typically we use a competency-based interview technique, which means we go back in your past experience and ask you to share some work you've done and relate it to the work that we need to have done. So it's good to look particularly at the competencies, and I'll show you the next slide where you can see here are a snapshot of what UNFPA, but also a lot of other UN agencies are looking for. And here you can see the competency lists. You have the core competencies, the managerial competencies, the educational language background, the values that we are highlighting, and the specific skills. So when you see a job posting, what I really would recommend you do is pay closely attention to the competencies, because those are the ones that you most likely will be asked about experiential anecdotes from your past work. So pay close attention to those. I also want to highlight the first bubble that talks about work experience. Here you get a good sense of what kind of jobs that you can apply to. For instance, when you are just fresh out of college and maybe you have 1 or 2 years of experience, it would typically be a P2 job you would apply to. And most places, they do need a master's, etc. So pay attention. There will be screening questions that are asking for your years of experience, etc. Make sure that you have the years of experience when you apply. So if we look at the next slide, I just wanted to highlight a couple of entry points to the UN. These 9 entry points you see are the typical entry points for jobs at the UN and big international development organizations. The top ones are, it goes a little bit like more further down in the list, they are more longer term. So the first one is like a short internship position, and it can be up to typically 3 months, and it can be extended up to 6 months. And it's a good way to start getting an experience with the UN. And it's typically during the later years of a study or up to 1 year after you finish your studies. It has been unpaid for a long time, but we finally made sure we can have a small stipend for our interns. It's a really good way of entering the UN and try it out. If you look at our website, there is a link there on our job site, and you can in there put in your profile, and if a manager needs somebody with your skills, they will contact you. The second one is a young professional program. A lot of the UN agencies have a young professional program. It's typically a 2-year program. You come in and you really get all the tools and the training, and then you are on a good track for a leadership career within that organization. It's extremely competitive. The World Bank has it as well. When I was there, we were managing it. It was like 10,000 applications and maybe 50 people a year who got in. So it's very competitive. Then the third one there is the UN Volunteer. It's a really good also tool for you to get experience. You can do online volunteering. You can do on-the-ground volunteering. It's something we look at with high, it shows high motivation for us for candidates. So it's a good thing to have tried before you apply for more longer-term positions. Then we have fellowship programs and the Jpo program. So if you're from a country, for instance, that has a junior professional officer program, that means that the government supports that young people can go and join the UN. So keep close attention to those. If you're, for instance, from European countries, they typically have it. Canada, the US have had some in the past. China, there are many different countries that have it. You can contact your own government and check if they have. Then you have the consultancies that are often posted. It can be from 1 day to a year. And it's very specific need an organization have, and you might fit that profile. So keep a close eye on that. And we have a roster for consultants, for instance, the UNFPA. You can also see that on our job site. The fellowship programs are programs that comes in and out when we need specific technical areas filled. Right now we have one on innovation and we have one on population data. So other organizations have them on other kinds of focus areas, and they're typically based as a UNV employment. And then just highlighting the international professional jobs, I showed earlier what the different levels and years of experience are for those. And then national officers are jobs in your own country where you're not working on international focus, but more on that particular national focus. And then we have general service staff who are typically doing clerical work, etc., and that can also be interesting jobs depending on the nature of the work. So sorry if I'm talking a little fast, but I know we have a few things we want to cover. And I just wanted to, the last piece I want to do is to give you some tips on what to think about, because we have learned from experience in HR that career management for young people can be a little bit difficult, particularly to navigate our system. So we wanted to show you a tool that you can use. This is just showing a holistic career approach. We have actually, let me show you here on the screen. We have, if you can see me, we have this guide, and it's available for you free of charge. It's on our website under the job page, and you can click on it. You can get it in French or in English. and you're welcome to download it, you're welcome to share with your colleagues. It's just some of our experience we put together in a folder. So the first one I just want to highlight is when you put your application together, look at your qualification first. Do they match? I would recommend you create a little table. On the left side, you put in the requirements of the job. On the right, you put your own skills and experience, and then you match and see if there are any gaps. I'm sure as an evaluation specialist, you know how to do that. It's important because then you can see, okay, I need this, this, and this to get to that level. Let me start working on those things. Be smart about it. The second point I want to highlight is your documents. Make sure you really have those in order. We are really good at work to be organized sometimes with our own stuff. We are a little sloppy. I would recommend you really are not. I would also recommend when you see a job, make a copy of the job announcement and save it on your own computer, because if you're invited for an interview and you try to go back in there and see what was it I applied for, it's often gone. So please be smart about it. A third point I really want to highlight is that networking is extremely important in the international development world. More than 90% of people who join us say that they had a contact before they got in, they knew somebody, it was a known face. It's rarely that an application just comes in, people get hired, and that's it. No, there's a little bit of work that needs to be done, and we recommend that you try to be smart about how you network. I'm not talking about going to a cocktail event and crack the right jokes. I'm talking more about that you, on your social media, you make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date. You make sure you, in your current environment, that you use the networks you have. In this one that I showed you early on, we have some tips how to do it, how to look at your network, map it out. You have networks in your sports club, in your school, in your job, in your church, and whatever you do in life, there are different networks you can use. Be smart about how you use it. Be culturally sensitive. Don't attack people with, oh, I need a job here. No, give them something. Come up with some ideas. Give some people something, and then you can ask for something in return. Be smart about it. I also want to say that it's really smart to think about being active in your current work environment. Most people, they go to work, they check in, they check out, and that's it. But there's a good group of maybe 25% that are more smart about how they network. They get involved, they set up working groups, they volunteer, they do stuff. And those are typically the people that are more successful in networking later on, because they are known face, they're active, they're out there, they're creative, they set up think tanks, etc. So think about if you want to be one of those more active networkers. It links to the next point, which is reputation management. Being in HR, I have a lot of experience seeing that people are really sometimes sloppy about their reputation management. And here I'm, of course, talking more about the social media these days. HR will look you up on your social media. Be sure of that. They will look up LinkedIn. They will look up your Facebook profile, etc. Make sure that your very personal stuff stays personal. Keep a firewall. Don't keep your Facebook open to the entire world, etc. We have had examples of people who are not smart about this. So please be smart about it. Another thing I want to say is, from experience, be smart about how you communicate, how you send out emails, etc. Never send an angry email. That is really good advice I got as a young person. If somebody writes to you, you can answer it, put it in draft the next day. I promise you it's no longer that important. Never send out angry emails. People will remember you in one line, or the angry guy, or the one who sent this. Nobody remembers why you did it. So be a little bit smart about that, because your reputation will haunt you if you're not smart about it. The next point I quickly want to touch on is just to reiterate what I said about before, the competencies. Really important. It links to performance management. It links to the job. It links to your promotion later on, all these things. So keep an eye on what are the competencies for those particular jobs that you're interested in, and then see how you best develop those. Also for the competencies, when you go for the interview, those you can really plan for. You can go through the different competencies in the application, have a good experience example from each of them, and you're good to go. The next point, the next 2 points I just want to highlight is the job satisfiers and the values. Job satisfiers are those things in a job outside the technical piece that are really important for you? Do you have autonomy in the workplace? Can you have a working day from home a week if you need that to take care of a kid or old parent, etc.? If it is really important for you to have a car and, you know, a lot of money and high visibility, etc., maybe UN is not the right place you want to go. You get a good salary at the UN, but we are looking for people with passion, and we have a big bureaucracy. We have big sort of hurdles we sometimes need to go. We have difficult discussions we need to have. So think about what kind of person you are. Can you travel a lot? Can you go and be away 80 days a year if you have little kids, etc.? So look at your organization. Look at the values that you really prioritize. There are many ways you can figure out your priority and values. There are the so-called value cards. You can find them online. Try it out. It tells you what are your 5 top values, and then you look at the organization. Would this fit together? There's an exercise in the book that I showed you, and I would really recommend you do it. It changes over time when your family changes, etc., but it's something you should consider so you don't end up in the wrong job. I want to highlight a website that could be useful. It's called Glassdoor. It gives you an insight to the organization from people who have worked there. Take it with a little bit of salt, because you know it's not always that it's the exact picture, but it gives a bit of an idea of what the organization looks like. Then just quickly, I want to highlight that you are in the if you are in a university, etc., you have all the access online and in your facilities to figuring out what are the opportunities in the world. The world is constantly changing. The climate is changing. The economic situation is changing. The social environment is changing. The IT, the innovation. There's so many things changing. Jobs that were here 20 years ago are no longer here. Jobs that we are being educated for today are gone when we are done. So keep an eye on it and really plan. Because the more you have sort of a sense of the pulse of what's going on, the better you can plan your own portfolio. Finally, I wanted to just reiterate the importance of emotional intelligence when you go into a process of managing your own career. You might be the best person, the most lovely person, but if you come across sloppy, unorganized, not prepared, etc., you won't get the job. I can give you an example recently where we interviewed a young lady who we interviewed from her kitchen. She was doing it on Skype. She was sitting in the kitchen in the background. There was a messy kitchen table, maybe from a party the night before, pots and pans sticking out. The panel couldn't concentrate much about what she was talking about because they felt that she was disorganized and so think about how you put yourself. Skype now have this nice way you can just blurry the background. So if you have a messy background, blur it a bit. And, there's also tools online. You can look more about emotional intelligence, how you come across in a meeting, when you come to the panel, how do you interact culturally, be sensitive, do you shake hands, look in the eye? Yes, you do that many places, some places you don't. So investigate a little bit before you go into those interactions. So that's basically the last 2 ones are simply just to highlight that if you have prepared all this, you are in control, you have the energy, and you are active. You have done what you can do. There are a few things you cannot control. We put it as luck. It's you can call it whatever, but for us it's like there are things you can't control. Things are happening. Jobs are coming up, others are competing, So, but when preparation meets opportunity, you're in a good spot. So have the right attitude, put your stuff together properly, and prepare and try it out with a colleague or a friend before you go into it. That's just a few tips. Please read our guideline, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael and Mr. Marco, for the informative and also for the very practical tips on how to join UNFPA or UN agencies, specifically how to become a young evaluator in the UN system. I see we have got several questions from our audience participants. So in order to save our time, we only have 20 minutes. for the Q&A session. So I will be reading 4 questions and then I give the floor back to Mr. Marco and Mr. Michael to respond to the questions. So the first question is to the Evaluate. Will the webinar be recorded and shared? Few audience participants have asked this question. Yes, we are recording the webinar and we will share the link of the record with you after the webinar. And also the second question is, how does one join the network? It means you're asking how you can join the Evaluate Global Network. So I'm just pasting the link of a survey that you can join the Evaluate Global Network. So you can just click on this link and in any of the Evaluate task forces that you are interested, you can submit an application, and your application is being reviewed by the Evaluate task force leadership, and then you will receive a confirmation email to join the Evaluate network. So all the other questions are to Mr. Marco and Mr. Michael. I'm reading the first 4 questions, and then I will give the floor back to Mr. Marco and then to Mr. Michael. So Leonard Nomfor has asked how to get the different agencies. Honestly, I'm not clear on this question. If Leonard Nomfor, you can add to your questions. You mean how your question is how to get to the different UN agencies? Is there something like that? And the second question is, can we get some links for those agencies? So Mr. Atiso has asked these questions. So most probably the question is that the links to the UN agencies. So Mr. Marco and Mr. Michael will be responding to your question. And the third question is, do all UN agencies have evaluation offices? The question was asked by Remont. And question number 4, is there a software shortlisting candidates based on the listed criteria, or you or your team do it manually? The question was asked by Grace. So these are the first 4 questions. I'm giving the floor back to Mr. Marco first, and then to Mr. Michael to respond to the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Himed. So perhaps I will take only a couple of them, and then I will ask Michael also to tackle the others. There was one question asking if all the UN agencies have an evaluation office. I would say that all UN agencies have an evaluation function, but not all agencies has a physical evaluation office. For your information, there are 48 United Nations agencies with an evaluation office, and those 48 agencies come together in the UN evaluation group. So I would like also to invite you to visit the UN evaluation group. You just have to Google it and you will find it, so that you can get more familiar with the evaluation office and evaluation functions in the UN system. Linked to this, I would like to reiterate one of the points that Michael mentioned about networking. So it's also an invitation to all of you to try to approach the so-called VOPE, that are the Voluntary Organization for Professional Evaluations, the evaluation associations, let's say, in your own country, because that's an excellent opportunity not only to network, but also to get exposed to the latest thinking, and actually to be active You remember the 25% of active people that Michael mentioned. I think that's really absolutely important. So not only join Evaluate, but also try to join your own national or regional evaluation association and be active in the different working groups, because that's both an opportunity for you to learn, but also an opportunity for you to get exposed to other people and organizations. And then there was one question about different agencies, etc. We share with the organizers quite long list of links, hyperlinks to the web page of UN agencies, to the web page directly relevant for job applications. So I'm sure that the organizer will share with you both those lists of hyperlinks as well as the link to the guides that Michael just talked about. So with this, I would like to give the floor to Mike.
Hey, so one question that I think I clearly understood is what shortlisting techniques are used. It's not typically it's not done manually. What we do is you apply online. We have screening questions that will sort out how the applications comes out. Then we have ways where in the system we can sort of filter for relevant experience, etc. And then, of course, we have a manual way that checks all the facts, have you answered correctly, your experience and all these things. And then a shortlist gets to the hiring manager that then makes a shortlist even shorter. And we typically interview maybe 3 to 5 people at the end. There could be a lot of steps in between where we maybe give a written assessment to 10 people and maybe we do a bid recruiter for the same amount of people. So we have giving the hiring manager an easy way to look through the material. I was not totally sure about question number 1. Imad, I don't know if you can clarify what that was, or we can take a few more.
The link is...
Oh, the links Marco mentioned. Marco.
Sure. Sorry to cut your advice. So the first question was already responded by Mr. Marco, and also just adding to that one about the UN Career Guide and also the link to the UN agency's website was shared with all registered participants in the confirmation email that we sent and inviting them to this webinar. So if you go back to that email, you can have both the English and also the French version of the UN Career Guide and also the link to the UN agency's website. So I'm going to share this second set of 4 questions. When will the reference check step interview? Normally it's after being selected, or the UN system is different. It can be right after the shortlist. The question was asked by Grace. So Mr. Marco and Mr. Michael, you also have the Google Docs of the questions. Maybe you can go through the questions if you don't get me properly. Question number 10, does UNFPA have YPP in all countries? Mr. Farhan Youssef has asked these questions. And question number 11, where can we find more information about the UNFPA Fellowship Program? Farhan Youssef has asked this question. And the other question is, you did not say anything on the STAR competency. Please share some insight on that. The question was asked by Joram Kibigo. So I see most of the questions are HR-related questions. Therefore, I will give the floor back to Mr. Michael first, and then to Mr. Marco to respond to these 4 questions.
Thank you. Very good questions. Yes, reference checks are used primarily to To check information is as it is. As you know, there can be a lot of mistakes and fraud in the system, etc. So what we do is when we have the top 2 or 3 candidates, we typically would go and take references, but we will always go back to the candidate first and say, okay, we are now at this step. We will contact, before we contact any current employees, we would not do it unless we were serious about it. So it's typically the top 2 or 3 candidates we would take references for. YPP programs, the young professional programs, we currently don't have one at UNFPA. We are a relative small agency, and they're quite costly. What we are doing instead are the fellowship programs, and we have 2 ongoing right now. They will be posted when they are before they begin. It's not a standing one like the internship and the UN volunteers. They come, and for instance, this year, in the beginning of the year, we posted our innovation fellowship program on our website. Later on, we posted the population and data fellowship programs, and it's available on our website when they come up. So I would recommend you put our LinkedIn page as something you want to follow, and then you will see when it happens. Websites, you can also on the websites for each agency put in your profile, and you get relevant jobs, whatever you have asked for relevant. If you are like evaluation, then that's the keyword. You say that anything to do with evaluation I would like to receive, or anything to do with a job in such and such a country, etc. Most of these websites can do that for you. There's a website that I use myself. It's called Impact Pool, and it pulls from different agencies, so it's a useful one. If you want to look for other agencies' YPP programs, go to their websites and search for I know the World Bank has one. I know that the UN Secretariat has one, etc. The UNDP had a lead program for a while. I think it's been on hold right now, but each agency look at it differently. The STAR, yes, you can look up on the internet. The reason why we say please focus on the STAR is when we ask for examples, be structured in your answers. You know how we tell a long story. It's actually better if you sort of put it into small pieces. So the S, talk about what was the situation. T, what was the task that particularly you had to do. A, what was the action you then did. And R, what was the result? That's why we put the star. So the situation, the task, the action, and the result. If you put your answer like that, very structured, it's easy for you to do it in a minute instead of babbling a long time about something, and then often people afterwards say, it was a bit long-winded, that answer. So the CAL is different, is another way to do it. I saw somebody wrote about that. It simply state the context, the action, the results, and the learning. We would often ask you at the end, what did you learn from this? If you had to do it again tomorrow, would you do it differently? So look at those 2 and just think about how you would answer a question.
Yeah, from my side, just to complement.
A young professional program. We as Evaluation Office of UNFPA, we have facilitated a partnership with the other 7 agencies, with the evaluation offices of other 7 agencies, to recruit young United Nations volunteers evaluators. And we did it through Evaluate. So we did a call last year for a number of posts, and as a result, for example, we have 2 young United Nations volunteers evaluators here in the office. So my advice would be always to keep an eye on Evaluate, because it's through them that we are trying to coordinate different UN agencies to facilitate the entrance in the labor market for young evaluators. And don't be misled, United Nations volunteers, despite of the name volunteers, they receive a salary. Maybe not a full-fledged salary as a staff, but still is not is still a salary. And there was also a question about career development. Him had already mentioned Evaluate is leading a mentorship program that is also supported by UNFPA. but also in the conferences of the evaluation associations, more and more we are supporting Evaluators to organize a pre-conference training on career development specifically for young evaluators. So once again, an additional incentive for you to approach and get involved with the evaluation associations, because they are giving you a lot of opportunities to grow your career. So over to you, Imad.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marco and Mr. Michael. So I see the clock. It is running very fast. We are already up. So we only have 4 minutes to close our today's webinar, and I'm going to quickly go through the 4 remaining questions and then giving back the floor to Mr. Marco and Mr. Michael. So the question is, what is the difference between the Young Professionals Program and Junior Professional Officers? And also there is another question. If nationality matters when applying for jobs in UN system, and is there a quota? Several participants have asked these questions. And also, how does the UN second career evaluators? Does it treat them the same as people fresh out of university, or does it credit transfer skills from prior experience in the other field? And also a question to Mr. Marco. Marco, international development is a large area. Do you recommend focusing on one SDG, or just few, or being a generalist? Patrick has asked these questions. And also a final question to Mr. Marco is, most of the developing countries lack the sound monitoring and evaluation system and policies. How does the UN evaluation agencies contribute to the mitigation of this catastrophe, given that in these countries monitoring and evaluation applies much in private organization and project rather than the public one? Therefore, most of the people with monitoring and evaluation skills in these countries are aligned with the private sector, not public. So these are the final questions. I'm giving back the floor to Mr. Marco and then to Mr. Michael.
Well, thanks a lot, Imad. Unfortunately, the audio came through not very well, so we were not able to understand the question. I could just capture one that I had read in the chat previously, and it was a question around the fact that the SDGs are very comprehensive. For what would be the advice? The advice would be to try to focus on a specific SDG or a specific sector, or to try to be somebody who can deal with the complexity of the SDGs. Definitely, I mean, complexity is an aspect that more and more will drive the agenda for evaluation. Is one of the biggest challenge for evaluation, how to evaluate the complexity of SDGs. And here is where young evaluator, once again, they can really contribute new innovative ideas, not only through the use of new technologies beyond social media, but also because for somebody who has been working in evaluation for the last 20, 30 years, for somebody who has been used to work in a certain manner and using certain methodologies and approaches to evaluation for the last 20, 30 years, it's more difficult to be flexible and to adapt to the needs of the new challenges. While for a young evaluator, it should be easier. And so that's one particular value added, potential value added of a young evaluator, to be innovative and flexible. Now, so complexity absolutely is something that is here, and it will remain for a number of years as a kind of challenge that should be addressed. But then, I think it's important to try to have this bold vision and the capacity to do, to apply system thinking approaches to evaluations and complexity, etc. while also trying to probably specialize on a particular field. Because each SDG is quite technical. You go from education to health, you go from climate to decent labor, etc. So it's also important that you try to be very knowledgeable about a particular sector so that you will be more attractive for the particular UN agencies that you are applying for. So this was the question that I could capture. So I give back to Michael if he was able to capture any other question. But as probably this is my last chance to speak because the time is already over. Let me just summarize from my side what are the tips. If you want to become a young evaluator in the UN system, so first be professional. Second, be committed to the values of the United Nations by really celebrating diversity and really, fighting for social equity, gender equality, etc. Third, really be passionate and believe in what you're doing, and be intentional. I think that if you cover these four, it's very likely that sooner or later your dream will become a reality. So with this, I would like to thank everybody and give the floor to Michael.
Hey, sorry, I know we are running out of time. I just saw a few questions there. The sound was a bit. I like a few of the questions. One is asking, online humanitarian courses, do they matter? Absolutely. Humanitarian is unfortunately something that is growing and is here to stay for a while. We have more crises in the world than ever, etc. We do a lot of online training today. So if you can show that you've already done some of that on the humanitarian side, I think it's great. And it links to another question where somebody asked, how about passion and purpose? And I will say we do more and more ask into passion and purpose when we do the interviews and when we try to see who are the right candidates. We look at the LinkedIn profile and see what, and we look at the CV. Have you volunteered? Have you early on done stuff that shows your passion while you've been studying, etc.? So yes, absolutely. I think without passion and purpose, I would discourage you from applying for working in these kind of fields. You might get frustrated. You might see that things are not moving as fast, etc. Your passion might get in your way, but without it, I think you won't last long. And then somebody asked, what are some of the skills in demand in the M&E area? I think I just wanted to add what Marcus said earlier. I want to add to it that no matter what job you have in the UN, there are certain skills now that you need to have as well. You need to be good at building partnerships across evaluator, or you're somebody else working, a manager or whatever you do, you need to be good at building partnerships, and it's with other agencies, it's with the private sector, it's with the governments, it's with the national entities, NGOs, etc. You need to be really good at analytics and bringing people together on evidence. So, those skills are really important. Languages keeps being really, really important. So make sure you try to get more than one language under your belt. We really focus on resource mobilization as well. It's become more and more evident that we're no longer relying on governments sponsoring the UN. We have to work with bilaterals. We have to work with private sector, etc. So skills in writing proposals, whether you're working in evaluation or in other area, is really important. So there are certain skills that are really cross-cutting. So I would highlight that you try and focus on that. Since somebody asked what's the difference between a Ypp program and a Jpo program, they're very, very similar. The main difference is that the Ypp program is an internal program within the organization that's sponsored by the organizations directly. The Jpo program is a program that is sponsored by governments and they pay for a national, typically from their own country, to be with the UN for 2 to 3 years. But some of them, like the Swedish, the Italian, and the Dutch program, they also offer it to people from different parts of the world that are not necessarily from their nationality. So that's the main difference. But they are both young, professional kind of training programs and learning programs where it's a really good first step in your career. Thank you. Thanks for my end as well. It's although I can't see you or hear you, it's great to have this connection. Thanks.